He was outnumbered, by some accounts 5-1. Across the dusty plain stood the largest army the ancient world had ever assembled. Hundreds of thousands of men drawn from every corner of an empire, squadrons of cavalry beyond counting, towering war elephants, and rows of chariots with curved blades bolted to their spinning wheels. It was a force built by the richest, most powerful empire on earth, and it was built for one purpose: to annihilate the young man standing against it. And that young man, a king of just 25 with a fraction of their numbers, looked across at those impossible odds and did the one thing no careful commander would ever dare. He attacked. Before the sun set that day, the greatest empire in human history would lie shattered, its king fleeing for his life across the desert, and this young man would become master of the known world. His name was Alexander, and this is the story of the most audacious victory ever won. The day at Gaugamela, when a single mind defeated an empire by aiming everything at one point. To understand how impossible this was, you have to understand the giant Alexander was fighting. The Persian Empire was not a kingdom. It was the superpower of the age. It stretched from Egypt to the edge of India, ruled tens of millions, and dwarfed everything the Greeks had ever known. For a century and a half, it had loomed over Greece like a storm that never broke. And now, a young king from Macedon had crossed into Asia with a single, breathtaking ambition: to take the whole thing. Alexander was just 20 when his father was murdered, and he inherited the throne, the army, and the dream of conquering Persia. Many assumed the boy would be swallowed whole. Instead, he marched east and began to win. At the river Granicus, he crushed a Persian army. At Issus, he did the unthinkable. He met the great king of Persia himself, Darius III, in person, and beat him, sending Darius fleeing from the field and leaving even his own mother, wife, and children behind in the rout. But a cornered empire is the most dangerous kind. Darius went home, and this time he did not raise an army. He raised a host. He summoned warriors from every province he ruled, horsemen from the steppes, archers from the mountains, infantry by the tens of thousands, elephants, and his dreaded scythed chariots. By the best estimates we have, he may have outnumbered Alexander 2, 3, perhaps 5 times over. There would be no escape this time, Darius swore. And Darius was not foolish. He did something genuinely clever. He chose the battlefield himself. He selected a wide, flat, open plain near a village called Gaugamela, and he set his men to work leveling it, clearing away every rock and ridge so his chariots could run at full speed and his vast numbers could spread wide and wrap around Alexander's little army from every side. He was building a killing ground, engineered for one outcome: to use his overwhelming size to envelop and crush. The night before the battle, Alexander's oldest and most trusted general, the veteran Parmenion, came to him with grim advice: attack now, in the dark. Use surprise, because in the open light of day, against numbers like these, surely they would be overwhelmed. Alexander refused. "I will not steal my victory," he is said to have answered. He would beat Darius in broad daylight, in full view of the world, leaving no excuse and no doubt. Then, with the fate of empires waiting for the dawn, Alexander returned to his tent and fell into a sleep so deep that the next morning his own officers had to shake him awake. When the sun finally rose over Gaugamela, Alexander's men saw the full horror of what they faced. The Persian army stretched across the entire horizon, so impossibly wide that its wings reached far beyond both ends of the Macedonian line. By every rule of war, Alexander was already beaten. His army was simply too small to cover that front. If he stood and waited, the Persian flanks would swing around him like the closing jaws of a trap, and his men would be surrounded and slaughtered. So Alexander refused to wait. He had a plan, and it rested on a single brilliant idea, one that would echo through 3,000 years of warfare. He could not be strong everywhere, so he would be devastatingly strong in exactly one place, at exactly the right moment, and accept weakness everywhere else. He drew up his army at an angle, deliberately holding his flanks back, and he took his own position on the right wing at the head of his finest soldiers, the companion cavalry, the elite heavy horsemen of Macedon, the hammer he intended to swing himself. In the center, he placed the phalanx, a bristling wall of infantry carrying the sarissa, a pike almost 20 feet long, forming a hedge of iron points that no head-on charge in the world could break. Old Parmenion he left to hold the left wing, the dangerous defensive post, with strict orders to hold at all costs and buy him time. And then Alexander did something that looked almost like madness. Instead of advancing straight at the enemy, he began to march to the right. Slowly, steadily, his entire army started sliding sideways across the plain, edging away from the center of Darius's carefully prepared ground. It seemed insane, but there was iron logic beneath it. By drifting right, Alexander was dragging the whole battle in his direction, pulling it toward the rough, unleveled edge of the field. If he kept going, he would march his army clean off the ground Darius had so carefully smoothed, and those precious scythed chariots would be useless on broken earth. Darius could not allow it, so he ordered the cavalry on his left to ride out and pin Alexander's drift in place. And that was precisely the trap. Because every single horseman Darius committed to that wing was a horseman drawn away from his own center, thinning the line in front of the king himself. Then Darius unleashed his great terror weapon. The scythed chariots exploded forward, blades whirling at the wheels, thundering straight at the Macedonian infantry, meant to carve screaming red lanes through their ranks. It should have been a slaughter. But Alexander had planned for this too. His light troops sprinted forward to meet them, hurling javelins, cutting down the drivers, seizing the horses by the reins. And the phalanx did something breathtakingly disciplined. As the chariots bore down, the men calmly opened lanes in their formation and let them rumble harmlessly through, then closed ranks again behind them. The horses thundered into empty corridors and were hacked down from behind. Darius's terror weapon had struck nothing but air. Now the great cavalry battle boiled across the wings, dust rising in a blinding storm. And Alexander's strange rightward march had done its silent work. The Persian line, stretched and pulled hard to its own left, began to fray. And there, in the very center of that enormous army, directly in front of the great king himself, a gap began to tear open, a hole in the line, the one decisive opening Alexander had been hunting for since the first step of the battle. And Alexander, watching the whole vast chaos with a calm and clarity that almost no commander in history has ever matched, knew that his single moment had finally come. What Alexander did in the next few minutes became one of the most famous acts in all of military history. He did not try to defeat the Persian army. He aimed at one man. He pulled his companion cavalry together and formed them into a single massive wedge, a giant arrowhead of horse, bronze, and iron, with himself riding at its very tip. And he drove that wedge not at the enemy line in general, but straight into the gap, straight through the torn center, straight at the heart of everything. Darius, his best men, his own life, the full weight of his strength concentrated into one screaming charge, aimed at the single point that could end the entire war: the enemy king. The wedge slammed into the Persian center and ripped it apart. Alexander cut deeper and deeper, smashing through the royal guard, carving a path of ruin toward the one figure that mattered. And Darius, the King of Kings, ruler of millions, the most powerful man on earth, looked up and saw death itself galloping toward him, a Macedonian king at the point of a spear of cavalry, coming for his life and nothing else. And Darius broke. Exactly as he had at Issus, the great king's nerve shattered. He wheeled his chariot around and fled the field. The man at the very center of that colossal army, the head upon which the entire body depended, turned and ran. And the instant his soldiers saw the royal standard turn and bolt, the heart went out of them. The center of the Persian host collapsed inward like a tower with its foundation torn away. But the battle was not yet won. And here, Alexander's triumph nearly turned into catastrophe. While he had punched clean through the center, disaster was unfolding on his other wing. The Persian cavalry on the right had broken through against old Parmenion, who was barely holding, pressed on every side, sending rider after desperate rider to beg Alexander for help. Some enemy horsemen had even smashed past the line and into the Macedonian baggage camp behind the army. For a few terrible moments, the man in the very act of conquering an empire was himself in danger of being trapped and destroyed. This was the hardest decision of his life. Darius, the single greatest prize of the entire war, was fleeing just ahead of him, almost within reach. Every instinct, every drop of ambition screamed at him to chase the king down and finish it forever. But his own army was bleeding to death on the left. And so Alexander did the disciplined thing, the agonizing thing. He let Darius go. He hauled his cavalry around and crashed back into the fight to save his left wing, throwing himself into some of the bloodiest, most desperate fighting of the entire day. By the time he had rescued Parmenion and broken the last Persian resistance, it was finished. That vast, endless host that had blackened the horizon at dawn was now nothing but a shattered, fleeing mass, pouring away across the plain in every direction. Tens of thousands lay dead. Alexander had lost only a few hundred. The largest army the world had ever assembled had been destroyed in a single afternoon by a force a fraction of its size. Because one man understood a truth most commanders never grasp. You do not need to be strong everywhere. You need to be unstoppable at the one point that decides it all. The victory at Gaugamela did not just win a battle. It ended a world. With his army annihilated and his courage spent, Darius fled east into the mountains, a king without a kingdom. And behind him, the gates of the Persian Empire swung open one after another. Babylon, the greatest city on earth, opened its gates to Alexander without a fight. Susa surrendered. Persepolis, the magnificent ceremonial heart of the empire, fell into his hands, and with it the royal treasure, wealth hoarded by the great kings for 200 years. At just 25 years old, Alexander was now the master of the known world. As for Darius, his story ended in tragedy. Hunted, abandoned, stripped of everything, the great king was finally betrayed and murdered by one of his own commanders, a satrap named Bessus, who imagined the killing would win him Alexander's favor. When Alexander came upon the dead king's body, it is said he was filled not with triumph, but with anger. And he laid his own cloak over the corpse. The King of Kings, who had once commanded millions, died alone in the dirt, killed not by his enemy, but by his own men. So here is the lesson, and it may be the single most powerful principle in all of strategy. On that battlefield, Alexander was outnumbered at every point. Had he tried to be equally strong everywhere, to match Darius man for man across that immense front, he would have been stretched paper-thin and crushed. Instead, he did the opposite. He deliberately accepted weakness almost everywhere in order to build crushing, overwhelming strength in one single place. And he drove that strength at the one point that would decide the whole battle, the enemy's center of gravity, the king himself. Cut off the head, and the body dies. This is the principle of concentration of force, and it sits at the heart of nearly every great victory ever won. The winner is almost never the side with the most. It is the side that concentrates what it has at the decisive point, while the loser scatters everything thin, desperately trying to be strong everywhere, and ends up strong nowhere. And this reaches far, far beyond any battlefield. In business, in your career, in any goal that truly matters, the temptation is always the same: to do a little of everything, to spread your time and energy and money across a dozen fronts, to try to defend and pursue everything at once. And it almost always ends in failure. Alexander's lesson is the exact opposite. Find the one point that decides everything, the one product, the one skill, the one relationship, the one move, and strike it with absolutely everything you have. Concentrate your force, accept that you cannot be strong everywhere, and choose instead to be unstoppable somewhere. Hannibal won his greatest victory by building the perfect trap. Alexander won his by hurling a single spear at the heart of an empire. Two of the greatest minds in history, two opposite roads to the very same truth. Victory belongs not to the largest force, but to the sharpest one. If this story taught you something, subscribe. Because every episode here breaks down one decisive move by history's greatest minds and the lesson you can actually use. Next time, we leave the battlefield behind for the mind that stands behind every strategy on this channel. A man who taught the world that the supreme skill in war is to win without ever fighting at all. Sun Tzu. I'll see you there.